So on Thursday, the US government, aka the Trump administration, basically created an executive order that would limit the ability for states to regulate AI, essentially meaning that AI will not be regulated, at least for the foreseeable. Now, states are going to challenge this, but essentially what this means, because one, the federal government's not going to, we can't move anything past Congress, and well, the Trump administration has already shown what they want to do. So this means that it's really gonna be up to us as the public to make sure that we're pushing our our legislators, our politicians to say this isn't right, that we need to have a say in this. Because at the end of the day, when I put this in here, it was like, why is this a big deal? And guess what? The AI said, oh, this is a single framework that reduces compliance complexity, less scrutiny so that we can move faster, more innovation. I call bullshit. Because at the end of the day, this is where, one, I feel that, there's this idea that in America, we have this kind of idea that we have 50 experimentation labs where we can all try different things out. California does things different than Florida and does different things than New York. And, that's why we have things like states' rights and our ability to govern our states in a way that we see fit. One of the biggest reasons that we had such improvement in how many miles per gallon cars would get in the last some years is because California said you have to have a standard that gets X number of miles per gallon. Well, what did that do to the auto industry? Instead of saying, hey, we're going to have one market for California and one car for the rest, well, no, it raised the standard. Now, that can have pros and cons for sure, right? So one of the biggest, well, let's just go into what the AIs had to say, because I thought it would be interesting to see of the architects of this AI revolution, what did their AIs say were good and bad about it? So, first one I asked was Grok.
Self-regulate.
What was that?
We're gonna let AI self-regulate in the end. It's the people at Congress that are going to go through the models and what they do and everything else. Like, you're gonna be putting into these models to.
I think we lost Max.
Who controls everything at the end?
AIs. I killed him before.
I know the AI is already censoring.
Max, are you there?
Hello.
Yes, now we
We
hear.
can see you now.
Yeah, I lost connection. I don't know which part you heard. Let's just say I'm concerned.
You said we were going to help the AI was going to self-regulate.
Yeah. So in the end, like that times picture, that's showing who the real control of these is, at least as of right now.
Wow, the AI really does not want Max to say what he's going to say.
He knows too much.
But I thought it was interesting. So I was like, hey, I asked the same AI or different AIs the same question. Give me the pros and cons of the new executive order on AI regulation in the States. And some of the pros that it, creates a nation standard. So basically having a patchwork of 50 state regimes. I can understand that a little bit. Like, for instance, as a model developer, you don't want to have to say, hey, I have to have a different model for each state based off of their rules. But guess what's really good at understanding rules and regulation? AI and text. But it does stifle the innovation that could come out of this, right? Of how you can actually not just regulate, but also align AI. It does, in certain systems, like in China, they do have this is the path we're going, and it can kind of help to move faster. But in the cases of like national security and things like that, we may not want to, especially like stuff like civil engineering. You don't want to move fast and break things. State autonomy. So there is in the US, there's something called the 10th Amendment, which basically says that states have their own rights. And there's already lawsuits. I know California is going to be pushing this to overturn this. But at the end, what I try to do is like, hey, the other question follow up was, what do you think, Grok, the AI, is this good or bad for the future of humanity? And of course, its overall verdict was good, with a push for a balance. So it's good. It leans into optimism. We've got existential challenges like climate change and resource scarcity. If we hobble AI with a patchwork of regulations. It won't help. But success does hinge on follow through, federal guidelines that do protect without paralyzing. I asked the same question, same kind of general, just pros and cons, states' rights, all these different things. Once again, I asked the same question to ChatGPT: is this good or bad for the future of AI and humanity? It can give its best reason take. And I specifically said, gave it a very, what's good and bad is very subjective. So I made it that vague on purpose. And this one came, I thought this was good. It was like, hey, it is good if it becomes a good for national rules, clear standards. It's bad if it's leading everyone to rely on a trust us bro model, which unfortunately I think is where we're going to. But it did give us a simple test for whether this is heading towards quote unquote good. So in the next 6 to 18 months, I thought this was good. Do enforceable federal standards appear? Basically, like, do we actually have federal laws that come out? Or is this just the wild, wild west and we don't have anything? Are high risk domains carved out with stricter obligations? So for instance, audits, incident reporting, anti-discrimination testing. Are there certain areas where like, okay, we do need to, especially in medical or legal or psychotherapy, these types of things, are there starting to have regulations around, having AI as your therapist? Also, are there meaningful recourse? And this is very important. If you do break the law, what happens? If laws do get created, are there penalties? What happens when the AI does cause harm? This is going to be now at least 2029 until we see any meaningful regulation. So what happens when one of these AI systems does go off the rails? What happens? And also too, is this going to help small companies like ours? Or is it really going to benefit and entrench the big companies? Meaning that, because they have people in Washington lobbying while small companies don't, are they just going to make rules that help pad their shareholders' bottom line and not help small companies who rely mainly on open source, which, to be honest, when you talk about regulation, I think the big fear of mine is regulating things like open source, because at the end of the day, open source technologies don't have lobbyists in Congress, and big tech companies are terrified of open source models. Even when China came out with DeepSeek, there was an actual push to have open source models banned. So are we going to see regulation not regulate big tech, but regulate open source, thinking it's too dangerous for the public to have? That's what I'm going to be looking for. And then also too, Google Gemini asked the same thing. It talked about the accelerationist view and also safety and ethics view. So from an accelerationist view, humanity will benefit from the speed. The thing that everyone's trying to sell is that it's going to cure disease, solve fusion energy. I think there's even a quote of Sam Altman saying, like, once we get to this super AGI, we're just going to ask it what to do, right? Like, that's a little terrifying. Also, too, that it wants to avoid bureaucratic capture. I do agree that you don't want to strangle the baby in the bed, so to speak. You do want to allow this technology to flourish, but if it just, benefits the incumbents and not open source and small companies, I think you're going to see a big problem. And at the end of the day, whoever builds AGI first, it's really going to have an impact if AGI is even possible. And at the end of the day, this could be a race to the bottom, meaning that things like, that in an effort to stay competitive and move fast, you're just going to see guardrails really go off. You already saw Mark Zuckerberg, in leaked memos say, that the chatbots were being too were being too regulated, and he wanted to take the guardrails off that. These are chatbots that are talking to children, and he wanted to take the guard. Like, no, sorry. Like that, you can't have this race to the bottom. If we only do this for speed and profit, it's going to be those people on that on that Time magazine that's going to benefit, not us. And it's going to continue to create the black box problem. I do agree with this because right now we don't understand how it's aligned. We don't understand how it's quote unquote thinking. We don't understand what it's going to do. And we do not understand what it's going to do when we have an entity that is way smarter than us, not just as an individual human being, but us as a collective. What does that mean? And if we don't take the time to understand what it's doing and to try to align it, I don't want to use the word control, but align it to, whatever we as a society come up with what that alignment should be, we really, really run that risk of just stepping out into the abyss and not knowing what's going to happen. So I think that, it's something that we should all be, I think, the combination of Times Architects of the Year coupled with this AI executive order has really got me thinking about this a lot. And I think everyone should be thinking about these are the people. It's not going to be the politicians, but it's those people that we have to put the pressure on, and they're all in the market. And guess what? In a market economy, we all vote with our dollars. So prioritize prioritize the companies that, in your opinion, are making good decisions, and also be one to support open source. Because honestly, I think that is the beachhead against corporate control, is open source models, open source orchestration, and open source data that goes into this. So it's free, ubiquitous, transparent to all of humanity, not just the Americans, the Chinese, or any other country. Any final thoughts?
Is this the second time they're trying to push for this in the States?
Good question. They did try to push this into the big, beautiful bill. This was back in, I think, in the summer, where they tried to slide in a law that said that they couldn't, regulate AI. Once the public, us, got wind of that, there was a huge pushback against both Republicans, Democrats, everywhere in between, saying, we don't want this. And what makes this concerning is basically, that was democracy, small d democracy in action. People called their politicians, said, we do not want this in that bill. Even proponents of what that bill was said, we do not want this. And now for the Trump administration to say, we're going to go ahead and do it anyway, that's going against the democratic will of what the people already did say they didn't want. So I think that it's troubling to say the least.
Yeah, but we all agree that security and guardrails in all of this AI is necessary for all of the different use cases we're working with. At the same time, I would personally want this unguardrailed without the guardrails systems and AGIs, because I'm sure they're a lot more smart. You could fire off, if you were at Anthropic, a cloud code for 24 hours and see what it does. So I want to play with that, and I think I agree with the AIs, stopping progress is not ideal. I think by doing that, you're trying to put a foot down on something that should not be stopped. And at the end of the day, it's science, and that's where I also enforce, not enforce, but want to support the open source, if we can, for our use cases and our things. I'm sure I'm going to try them out for my personal stuff.
Yeah, I think the only path forward is open source. I mean, I've been ever since, what we now consider AI, when ChatGPT came out, Max, this, I've been talking, I think that AI should be a public utility, that it should be open, transparent, ubiquitous, and free for everyone, and not just owned by a select few. And that's what I will continue to fight for all day, every day. So on that note, this is but I think it is important for us as true builders, as true AI architects of what we're doing. I think it's important for us to know as well, we may not be the ones that are on that Time magazine. We're the ones that are striking the hammer. We're the ones that are, putting that rivet in every day in what we do. And it's going to be important for us as the individuals to know that we do have a say in this, that we do have a voice, and we just need to make that voice louder and direct it towards the right people, not against an inanimate tool. All right. Well, thank you all.